Hacker Black, CISSP.
Domain 2. Asset Security. Domain Agenda. Information and Assets. Asset Lifecycle. Information and Asset Ownership. Protect Privacy Asset Retention. Domain Agenda, Continued. Data Security Controls. Information and Asset Handling Requirements. Data Remnants. Domain Review. Module 1. Information and Assets. Module Objectives. 1. Understand key asset terms such as assets, information, data, resources, etc. 2. Explain how security controls are dictated by the value of assets, including information. 3. Understand that information/data is only one example of valuable assets that organizations need to protect based on the value of those assets to the organization. 4. Explain how asset classification drives the protection of assets based on value. Assets, information, and resources. Assets and resources make value. Assets, information, and other valuable resources. Value of an asset. Quantitative. Qualitative. Protection of valuable assets. Should be based on the value. Examples of valuable assets. People. Corporate reputation/brand. Products. Information/data. Architectures. Processes. Hardware. Software. Intellectual property/ideas. Identification/discovery and classification of assets based on value. Identify/discover assets. Inventory. Needs to be formal process. Asset classification. Requires management support, commitment, and conviction. Accountability. Policies. Training/awareness/education. Classification process. Assess and review. Asset inventory. Determine and assign ownership. Classify based on value. Protect and handle based on classification. Process of protection of valuable assets based on classification. Identify and locate assets including information. Asset discovery. Classify based on value. Requires ownership to establish accountability. Protect based on classification. Baselines for each classification level. Module 2. Asset Lifecycle. Module Objectives. 1. Describe the asset lifecycle. 2. Understand how data classification and categorization applies to the asset lifecycle. Asset Lifecycle. Steps. 1. Identify and classify. 2. Secure and store. 3. Monitor and log. 4. Recover. 5. Disposition. 6. Archive. Or 7. Destruction. Asset lifecycle. Differences between classification and categorization. Classification. Classify data/assets based on the value to the organization. What is this stuff? Categorization. Protect the data/asset based on the impact of loss of the asset. Based on what this is, how do we need to protect it? Classification. Ensures assets are marked and protected, based on value, in such a way that only those with an appropriate level of clearance can have access to the information. Categorization. The process of determining the impact of the loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of the information to an organization. Data classification policy. Who will have access to the data? How the data is secured. How long the data is to be retained. What methods should be used to dispose of the data? Whether the data needs to be encrypted. The appropriate use of the data. Examples of classification levels. Should be easy to determine the right levels of classification by the owner, and others should fully understand how to protect. Examples. Top secret. Company restricted. Company confidential. Public. Classification done by owners. The individual who owns the data should decide the classification. Owners should review the classification on a regular basis and adjust based on value at that particular time. Classification system should allow the increase or decrease in classification. Change needs to be documented to allow system to adjust based on new classification. Purpose of asset classification. Ensure that information assets receive an appropriate level of protection. Provide security classifications that will indicate the need and priorities for security protection. Minimize risks of unauthorized information alteration. Avoid unauthorized disclosure. Purpose of asset classification, continued. Maintain competitive edge. Protect legal tactics. Comply with privacy laws, regulations, and industry standards. Classification benefits. Benefits of having classifications are: awareness among employees and customers of the organization's commitment to protect information. Identification of critical information. Identification of vulnerability to modification. Enable focus on integrity controls. Sensitivity to the need to protect valuable information. Understanding the value of information. Meeting legal requirements. Issues related to classification. Information is classified by the information owner or designate. Human error. Proper classification is dependent on ability and knowledge of the classifier. Requires awareness of regulations and customer and business expectations. Requires consistent classification method, often the decisions can be somewhat arbitrary. Needs clear labeling of all classified items. Must include support for declassification and destruction of assets. Module 3. Information and Asset Ownership. Module Objectives. 1. Understand the importance of establishing accountability and responsibility for asset and information ownership and custodianship. 2. Explain accountabilities and responsibilities for protection of assets by owners, custodians, stewards, controllers, and processors. 3. Explain key terms associated with asset protection. Asset protection and classification terminology. The following are key terms associated with asset management: data subject, data owner, data custodian, data steward, personal data, processing, data controller, data processor, data ownership. Accountable for important information security activities surrounding the life cycle of information to protect it. Ensure it is available to only those who require access. Destroy it when it is no longer needed. Information owner. The data owner typically has the following example accountabilities. Determine the impact the information has on the mission of the organization. Understand the replacement cost of the information, if it can be replaced. Know when the information is inaccurate or no longer needed and should be destroyed. Determine who has a need for the information and under what circumstances the information should be released. Data custodianship. Typical responsibilities include the following: adherence to appropriate and relevant data policies, standards, procedures, baselines, and guidelines. Ensuring accessibility to appropriate users, maintaining appropriate levels of data security. Fundamental data maintenance, including but not limited to data storage and archiving. Data documentation, including updates to documentation. Assurance of quality and validation of any additions to data, including supporting periodic audits to ensure ongoing data integrity. Difference between data owner/controller and data custodian/processor. Data owner/controller. The controller acts as the owner, therefore is accountable. Accountable for the protection of data based on relevant national or community laws or regulations. Data custodian/processor. The processor processes data on behalf of the owners, example cloud provider. Difference between data owner/controller and data custodian/processor, continued. Data owner/controller. The natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body that alone or jointly with others determines the purposes and means of the processing of personal data, where the purposes and means of processing are determined by national or community laws or regulations. The controller or the specific criteria for his nomination may be designated by national or community law. Data custodian/processor. The processor processes data on behalf of the owners, example cloud provider. Therefore, is responsible for the adherence of policies, standards, procedures, baselines, and guidelines to ensure protection while in their custody. Module 4. Protect privacy. Module Objectives. 1. Understand how privacy of personal information is affected by today's technology. 2. Explain the expectations of subjects according to privacy laws and regulations. 3. Explain the importance of the OECD guidelines on privacy protection. 4. Express the 8 principles for privacy protection according to the OECD guidelines. 5. Understand the concept of collection limitation as it applies to privacy. Privacy Introduction. Individuals should have control over their personal information. According to many data protection laws, personal information must be obtained fairly and lawfully, Used only for the original specified purpose. Adequate, relevant, and not excessive to purpose. Accurate and up to date. Not kept longer than necessary. Accessible to the subject. Kept secure. Not transmitted to a country without adequate level of protection. OECD Privacy Guidelines. Collection Limitation Principle. Data Quality Principle. Purpose Specification Principle. Use Limitation Principle. Security Safeguards Principle. Openness Principle. Individual Participation Principle. Accountability Principle. Domain 2. Asset Security. Information Classification. Categorization, process of determining the impact of loss of CIA of information to an organization. Identifies the value of the data to the organization. Not all data has same value, demonstrates business commitment to security, identify which information is most sensitive and vital. Criteria, value, age, useful life, personal association. Levels. Government, military. Unclassified, have FOO also sensitive but unclassified. Confidential, some damage secret, serious damage, can have country-specific restrictions also, South secret for New Zealand, Australia and US secret top secret, grave damage. Private sector. Public, used by public or employees. Company confidential, viewed by all employees but not for general use. Company restricted, restricted to a subset of employees. Private, X. SSN, credit card info, could cause damage. Confidential, cause exceptionally grave damage, proprietary, trade secrets. Sensitive, internal business. TS equals confidential/prop, secret equals private, confidential equals sensitive security policies, standards and guidelines. Policies first and highest level of documentation. ARI first is called Senior Management Statement of Policy. Stating important support and commitment types. Regulatory, required due to laws, regulations, compliance and specific industry standards. Advisory, not mandatory but strongly suggested. Informative to inform the reader. Information policy, classifications and defines level of access and method to store and transmit information. Security policies, authenticates and defines technology used to control information access and distribution. System security policy, lists hardware, software to be used and steps to undertake to protect infrastructure. Standards, specify use of specific technologies in a uniform way. Guidelines, aim as standards but not forced to follow. Procedures, detailed steps to perform a task. Baseline, minimum level of security. Security planning, involves security scope, providing security management responsibilities and testing security measures for effectiveness. Strategic 5 years tactic shorter than strategic operational day-to-day, short-term. Data classification policy. Who will have access to data? How is the data to be secured? How long is data to be retained? What methods should be used to dispose of data? Does data need to be encrypted? What is the appropriate use of the data? Proper assessment requires 1. Inventory management, all things. 2. Configuration management, plus patching. IT asset management, ITAM. Full life cycle management of IT assets. CMBD, holds relationships between system components, incidents, problems, known error, changes, and releases. Single repository. Organizationally aligned scalable US-EU, Swiss, Safe Harbor, 124 the EU Data Protection Directive to be replaced, in 2018, by the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR bridge differences in approach, and provide a streamlined means for U.S. organizations to comply with European Commissions. Strengthening individuals' rights. Data obtained fairly and lawfully. Data only used for original purpose. Adequate, relevant, and not excessive to purpose. Accurate and up to date. Accessible to the subject. Kept secure. Destroyed after purpose is complete. Directive on Data Protection, 7 Tenets. Notice, data subjects should be given notice when their data is being collected. Choice, data should not be disclosed without the data subject's consent. Onward transfer, data subjects should be informed as to who is collecting their data. Security, collected data should be kept secure from any potential abuses. Data integrity, reliable, only stated purpose. Access, data subjects should be allowed to access their data and make corrections to any inaccurate data. Enforcement, accountability, data subjects should have a method available to them to hold data collectors accountable for not following the above principles. Not reason or retention time. US org is data processors when they classify and handle data. EU company would be business/mission owners. US org would also be data administrators. Data processors have responsibility to protect privacy of data. DPT of Commerce holds list of participants. Can transfer to non-safe harbor entities with permission. FTC oversees compliance framework for organizations wishing to use personal data of EU citizens. Self-certify by DPT of Transportation or FTC can enforce. Graham/Leach/Bailey Act delaying application to financial markets. Roles and responsibilities. Senior Manager ultimate responsibility. Information Security Officer functional responsibility. Ensure policies etc. are written by app. Unit. Implement/operate certs. Provide leadership for security awareness. Communicate risk to senior management. Stay abreast of current threats and technology. Security Analyst Strategic. Develops policies and guidelines. Data ownership, 128 data life, creation, use, destruction subservient to security policy. Data/information owner. Ultimate organizational responsibility for data. Categorize systems in data, determine level of classification. Required controls are selected for each classification. Select baseline security standards. Determine impact information has on organization. Understand replacement cost. If replaceable, determine who needs the information and circumstances for release. Determine when information should be destroyed. Responsible for asset. Review and change classification. Can delegate responsibility to data custodian. Authorize user privileges. Data custodian responsibilities, 129 day-to-day tasks, grants permission to users in DAC. Adhere to data policy and data ownership guidelines. Ensure accessibility, maintain and monitor security. Dataset maintenance, archiving. Documentation, including updating. QA, validation and audits. Run regular backups/restores and validity of them. Ensuring data integrity and security, CIA maintaining records in accordance to classification. Applies user authorization. Implement security controls. System owners, select security controls. Administrators. Assign permission to access and handle data. End user. Uses information as their job. Follow instructions and policies and guidelines. Do care, prevent open view by, for example, clean desk, use corporation resources for corporation use. Auditor examines security controls. QC and QA. QC, assessment of quality based on internal standards. QA- assessment of quality based on standards external to the process and in. Benefits of data standards. Increased data sharing. Considerations. Borders. Encryption. Data modeling. Smallest bits of information the DB will hold, granularity. When do we replace, then think about next one. Critical equals availability. Data remnants. Residual physical representation of data that has been in some way erased. FIS deals with it best in cloud. Remnants, residual data left on media after erase attempts. Remove unwanted remnant data from magnetic tapes. Physical destruction. Degaussing. Overwriting. Not reformatting. Sanitizing, series of processes that removes data, ensures data is unrecoverable by any means. Removing a computer from service and disposed of. All storage media removed or destroyed. Degaussing, AC erasure, alternating magnetic fields, DC erasure, unidirectional magnetic field or permanent magnet, can erase tapes. Erasing, deletion of files or media, removes link to file, least effective. Overwriting/wiping/shredding, overwrites with pattern, they miss. Zero fill, wipe a drive and fill with zeros. Clearing, prepping media for reuse at same level. Removal of sensitive data from storage devices in such a way that the data may not be reconstructed using normal system functions or utilities. May be recoverable with special lab equipment. Data just overwritten. Purging more intense than clearing. Media can be reused in lower systems. Removal of sensitive data with the intent that the data cannot be reconstructed by any known technique. Destruction, incineration, crushing, shredding, and disintegration are stages of this. Encrypt data is a good way to secure files sent through the internet. SSD data destruction. NIST says to disintegrate. SSD drives cannot be degaussed, space sectors, bad sectors, and where space/leveling may hide non-addressable data, encrypt is the solution. Erase encryption key to be unreadable. Crypto erase, sanitization, targeted overwrite best. Buy high-quality media, value of data exceeds cost of media. Sanitation is business normal, not destruction for cost reasons. Reuse, downgrading equipment for reuse will probably be more expensive than buying new. Metadata, helps to label data and prevent loss before it leaves the organization. Data mart, metadata is stored in a more secure container. Baselines. Select based on the data classification of the data stored/handled. Which parts of enterprise can be protected by the same baseline? Should baseline be applied throughout whole enterprise? At what security level should baseline aim? How will the controls be determined? Baseline starting point that can be tailored to an organization for a minimum security standard. Common security configurations, use group policies to check and enforce compliance. Scoping and tailoring. Narrows the focus and of the architecture to ensure that appropriate risks are identified and addressed. Scoping, reviewing baseline security controls and selecting only those controls that apply to the IT system you're trying to protect. Tailoring, modifying the list of security controls within a baseline so that they align with the mission of the organization. Supplementation, adding assessment procedures or assessment details to adequately meet the risk management needs of the organization. Link versus end-to-end encryption. Link is usually point-to-point everything encrypted. Black pipe, black oil, black ping-pong balls, all data is encrypted, normally did by service providers. End-to-end, you can see all but payload, normally done by users. You can layer these encryption types. Email is not secured unless encrypted. Netscape invented SSL, SSL v3 still used. Use TLS v1.2 now for test. PGP equals new PG, GNP-not rely on open. S/MIME, secure email. Nice to know. Classifying costs. Costs are not a factor in classifying data but are in controls. FTP and Telnet are unencrypted. SFTP and SSH provide encryption to protect data and credentials that are used to log in. Record retention policies, how long data retained and maintained. Removable media, use strong encryption, like ISO 256, to ensure loss of media does not result in data breach. Personnel retention deals with the knowledge that employees gain while employed. Record retention, retaining and maintaining information for as long as it's needed. Label data, to make sure data is identifiable by its classification level. Some label all media that contains data to prevent reuse of public media for sensitive data. Data in RAM is data in use. CISSP, Center for Internet Security, creates list of security controls for OS, mobile, server, and network devices. Standards selection. NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST SP 800 series, address computer security in a variety of areas. 800-14 NIST SP, GAP for securing information technology systems. 800-18 NIST, how to develop security plans. 800-27 NIST SP, baseline for achieving security, 5 lifecycle planning phases, defined in 800-14, 33 IT security principles. Initiation. Development/acquisition. Implementation. Operation/maintenance. Disposal. 800-88, NIST guidelines for sanitation and disposition, prevents data remnants. 800-122, NIST special publication, defines PII as any information that can be used to trace a person identity such as SSN, name, DOB, place of birth, mother's maiden name. 800-137, build/implement info security continuous monitoring program, define, establish, implement, analyze and report. 800-145, cloud computing. FIPS, Federal Information Processing Standards, official series of publications relating to standards and guidelines adopted under the FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act of 2002. FIPS 199, Standards for Categorizing Information and Information Systems. FIPS 200, Minimum Security Requirements for Federal Information and Information Systems. DoD 8510.01 establishes DICAP. ISO 15288, International Systems Engineering Standard covering processes and life cycle stages. Agreement. Organization Project Enabling. Technical Management. Technical. Nice to know. COPA, California Online Privacy Protection Act, operators of commercial websites post a privacy policy of collecting personal information on CIA residents. Curie temperature, critical point where a material's intrinsic magnetic alignment changes direction. DAR, data at rest, inactive data that is physically stored, not RAM. Biggest threat is a data breach. Full disk encryption protects it. Microsoft BitLocker and Microsoft EFS, which use ICE, are apps. DLP, data loss/leakage prevention, use labels to determine the appropriate control to apply to data. Won't modify labels in real time. ECM-Enterprise Content Management, centrally managed and controlled. Non-disclosure agreement, legal agreement that prevents employees from sharing proprietary information. PCI DSS, Payment and Card Industry, Security Standards Council, credit cards, provides a set of security controls or standards. Watermark, embedded data to help ID owner of a file, digitally label data and can be used to indicate ownership.